pretty hot outside, huh?
Yeah. Again, it was raining forever.
Yeah.
And now it's hot again.
It's like 106 yesterday or something.
I'll take the dry heat over the humidity we had for a little while there, though.
Yeah, that was intense. It was very Midwesternish.
You wake up every morning and be like sticky and not fun, but I'll take 110 and dry. That's just me, though.
Hey, so go ahead and let the listeners know who you are.
I am Chris Collins, and I'm the executive pastor at Oro Valley Church of the Nazarene here in the Tucson area.
Right on. And I have a pleasure of attending that church. It's a great organization and church, and I get to volunteer on the production team, and it's always great to see you and the other pastors present and help the community. It's a great thing. And, I brought you on the show because I really want to, talk about how you got there. Mm-hmm. How did this manifest? Where did you start when, just every little piece to getting to where you're at right now? Because what you do is so significant in the community and for people. And it just doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate these kind of longer form interview things too. A lot of things are just kind of, we live in a soundbite culture, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can't tell the story in 30 seconds or less, a lot of times people don't want to hear it. But I think there are some people that, appreciate still hearing people's story and learning, about that. And I want to brag on you a little bit because I think you undersold a little bit how you volunteered. It was almost maybe about a year ago, we called you you and Clint and said, hey, we've got a real need for some volunteers, and will you guys come and show up and run a camera? And you guys just jumped right in.
Yeah.
And it's hard to believe that it's been about a year ago since that happened, and you guys stepped up and jumped in, and it's been an honor and a privilege to have you serve the church in the way you do, and you guys make a difference.
We appreciate that. Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
So you asked, I guess, just how I got here. I'm a Tucson native. I was born and raised here. In Tucson, a little bit of a unique upbringing in that I kind of grew up on both sides of town. Like if you're from Tucson, you know there's kind of like a northwest side and an east side, which is kind of, and there's a south side too. But anyway, I grew up on the east side of town up until about sixth grade, and then moved to the northwest side of town to go to middle school and high school. Graduated from Flowing Wells back in 1997.
Oh, right on.
So hopefully all my Caballeros are listening out there, and. So graduated from Flowing Wells in 97, and then pursued college through baseball. I was a baseball guy. I was an athlete all through high school, but I was a baseball guy at heart. And so I actually bounced around several different places chasing my college baseball dream. It took me to South Mountain Community College up in the Phoenix area for a couple years. I spent 1 year at the University of New Mexico. In Albuquerque, playing there for the Lobos. And then I finished my senior year at Trevecca Nazarene University in Nashville. And so that's where I kind of finished up. And so my journey and my path to get to that place, at least pursuing the baseball, was kind of all over the place. But I'm a Tucson native, so it was good to be able to come back home after a while.
Right on. So with the college career, did you go into the minor league or anything? Did you try to become pro in any way? Or
Well, I thought I did. That was part of the reason why I bounced around. I probably had maybe a higher view of my skill than what reality was. And so I bounced around several different places, kind of chasing that dream. I wanted to be drafted. I wanted to play professionally. But when I did graduate, finally, I had an opportunity to do some other things through coaching and working there at the university at Trevecca. And so I opted not to try to pursue a minor league career or an independent league career. I didn't get drafted, so the opportunities wouldn't have been hard to come by. But I took a graduate assistant position and started working on my master's while I was getting started coaching. So I went that route instead of trying to pursue the professional thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long did you coach for?
So I coached college baseball for 10 years.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. So when I graduated from Trevecca, a guy was our head coach, who actually became one of my best friends and one of my mentors. I've got a real unique work experience, but I've been fortunate. I've basically had 3 jobs in my professional life, and in all 3 jobs, my boss has been one of my best friends. It's been a really unique experience for me. But Jeff Forehand was our head coach at Trevecca and became one of my best friends, and asked me if I would stay on on after my playing time to be a graduate assistant. And I fell in love with coaching in about a week. And I thought, man, if this is a way that you can impact young men, this is a way you can make a difference and kind of serve people and families and still be able to compete and be in that athletic environment, I was in. So I spent 6 years at Trevecca. The first 4 years I was an assistant coach, and then at 27 I actually became the head coach at Trevecca. I was, according to our sports information director at the time, I was the youngest head coach in all of college baseball in all of America.
I was going to say 27 years old, head coach of a college program.
Yeah, so it was a really, really unique experience, and one that I felt like God had just kind of orchestrated and ordained and just blessed me with the opportunity. And so I spent 2 years as the head coach there. Our team had great success. My mentor, Jeff, had built the program to such a place where it would have been, hard not to win and not to do well. So we had some continued, success. And then after 2 years as the head coach, so my 6th year overall at Trevecca, I went to work for Jeff again, this time across town at Lipscomb University, which was a mid-major Division I. I had a dream of, doing this at the highest level in college baseball. So being in a Division I program kind of fit that dream and that goal, and tried to, had a dream to take a team to Omaha, even from a place like Lipscomb. And in baseball, it's one of those unique things. It can be done, unlike some of these other sports, right? Like it can be done in baseball. You see there's history of lots of kind of smaller programs, from Coastal Carolina winning a national championship to, I don't know if you remember a few years ago, but I think it was Kent State and Stony Brook were both in the College World Series in the same year. And these are, really smaller kind of mid-major type schools. And so it can be done. And so that was kind of my dream and my goals. And I spent 4 years with Jeff before I got out of coaching and moved back here to the Tucson area.
Right on. So what brought you back here to the Tucson area?
I got a call the Monday before Thanksgiving in 2011. I remember it vividly. I could take you to the stretch of highway in Nashville while I was on my way to work. I got a call from a guy named Brian Beltramo, who was the state director for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I had met Brian at a career day in high school back at Flowing Wells, like in 1995. And eventually had done an internship with him at Channel 4, where he was a sports broadcaster, because it was my dream and goal to be a play-by-play announcer for a Major League Baseball team. That's what I wanted to do. I was in communications, wanted to do broadcast journalism, and so I had an opportunity to intern with him. But he called me. He had left TV, and he was working for FCA now, and he'd become the state director, and he was driving down to Tucson and said, hey, I'm going to a board meeting in Tucson. I've been praying about how to expand the ministry here, and the Lord brought you and Sharon to my mind, and I just wanted to call and ask you, would you ever consider, doing sports ministry? And when I got the call, it was kind of like, well, no. I'm doing Division I baseball. I'm on kind of the fast track here for coaching, and like everything's falling into place, and we love Nashville. Really didn't want to move back to Tucson. And so that was when we got the call and began the prayer process on it. In fact, one of the I called a spiritual mentor of mine and just said, hey, what should I do here? And he gave me this piece of advice, and it stuck with me. And he said that sometimes you have to trust the God in others as much as you trust the God in you. Brian was a good friend. I believed him to have a strong relationship with the Lord. And so if God brought us to his mind, I had to believe that there was a reason for that. Either God wanted us to respond to that, or he wanted us to pray through it. So that's what we did. We just prayed through it, and we didn't have a burning bush moment. We didn't have a thunderous, booming voice that came from heaven that was audible, but a lot of little things happened in our process. And after about 6 months, Sharon and I felt like, you know what? This is something we feel like God's calling us to do. Leave Nashville, come back to Tucson, go to work for Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and try to make an impact on coaches and athletes, and kind of take the experience we had from athletics and coaching and try to apply it to ministering to who I still believe are some of the most influential people in our culture, and that's coaches. So that's what brought us back to town, and that's what started our work with FCA.
That is an incredible story.
Yeah,
Pretty
cool.
Yeah, that piece of advice you just put out, man.
Yeah.
That kind of gave me some chills. I really started thinking about it.
Yeah.
When we talk about sports and coaching, can you explain? I'm biased coming at this, right? Because I did play sports growing up. I played football was my sport. I ended up playing college football up in Missouri Valley College for a little bit. Can you explain how important sports are for the youth.
Yeah.
For moving forward in life.
Yeah. I think it's one of the best teachers that our culture and society has. And what's kind of unique about it, I think, here in America is if you look at other countries or other stuff, let's just take like the stuff that's going on in Afghanistan right now. It's tragic, it's crazy, it's disappointing, it kind of baffles the mind. It should hurt our heart, just everything that's happening there. But I think about the youth in Afghanistan, in a place like that, there's no sports culture. Those kids don't get to grow up and play team sports and try to learn values through that, right? So in America, we have this unique opportunity to do that, and it's such a part of the fabric of our culture. But I think the value of playing sports, the lessons that it teaches you about adversity, about hard work, about perseverance, about failure and success, and how to handle both of those things the right way.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a better teacher for our youth than that environment. I think there are other things that are vitally important.
Yeah.
Education, spiritual development, family, all of that's important. But you put kids in an environment where you have to succeed or you're going to fail, and then you've got to learn from that to figure out how to move on. It is one of the best teachers for life. It's my life story. I come from a broken home. My parents divorced when I was 3 years old. My mom was a drug addict and abused alcohol, and she basically chose that addiction over our family.
Yeah.
And my dad took me, at that point, we went into kind of an environment with a new stepmom and a home situation that wasn't great then. My mom got her life back together. She's been 35 years plus clean now, so the Lord's really restored her, and that's been an amazing testimony for her. But then I bounced over and lived with her and another stepdad, and I had a half-brother that was a part of my life and still is a great part of my life. And so I have a grandmother that took me in from 7th grade until the time I graduated high school. I had an uncle that influenced my life. So I have all these things, and if you're listening to that, you're probably wondering, well, how does that all fit together? And we'd probably need a 2-hour show to do that. But the bottom line is I had all this disconnect in my upbringing, but I had a few things that were constant. One of them was athletics. I always was wanting to compete. I was always wanting to put myself in that environment and play and work hard, and it was probably because it was an escape from some of the things that were a challenge. I was always loved. I was always cared for. I always had everything I needed.
Yeah.
But I did not have that traditional environment, and sports became that outlet. So I played everything. Anything where you could keep score or compete, I was in on. And kind of continued that, from the time I was little all the way through my high school days until I became a college athlete. That's what I wanted to be about. But I know one of the rules in our house as I bring up my 3 kids is that you are going to play a team sport. I don't care what team sport it is, but you're going to play it. And you're going to be a part of that, because I think what you learn from being a part of a team at that age carries on to LTD is a team of people.
Yep.
Right? We just
Exactly.
don't do athletics here necessarily. We do other things, but we're still a team, right? Oro Valley Church of the Nazarene and our staff and our pastors and the people that work there, we're a team. And most of the way I lead is from that mindset. I lead as a coach. I lead in that way. And so we can get kids in that environment and get them to learn the concepts of that, not win at all costs and not cut corners and not cheat to come out ahead, but just compete. Do your best. Measure yourself against your own potential.
Yeah.
Do the absolute best you can, and then figure out how later that applies to the things you're going through in life. I think some of the most successful people, these studies have been shown. You look at Fortune 500 CEOs and executive vice presidents and presidents of these well-established companies. I think the number is upwards of 75 or 80% of them were high school athletes. There's something that's a part of that success that's connected to your ability to function in a team and to compete and be a part of it. So that's a long answer just to say, man, I think it's vitally important, and it's one of the reasons why at OVCN we're all in on sports ministry and moving that direction to try to influence our community, because we think it makes a difference for kids.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I really do. Because you really covered that part where it's not, win at all costs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You're going to lose.
That's right.
And you're going to learn a lot from losing.
That's right. Yeah.
And you're going to see that you can gain knowledge from the loss. You can improve yourself from the loss, and the team can improve from the loss.
Yeah.
And the same goes throughout life. Like you said, you're going to lose sometimes at life.
That's right.
Not every day is going to be rainbows and unicorns.
That's right. And we're in a culture right now that I think you and I are potentially partly at fault for it, because we're the ones that have created it with, the kids now. We don't want them to fail. Yeah. We don't want to keep score. We want everybody to be encouraged and everybody gets a trophy. And I laugh sometimes at the I guess the stigma or the label that we've put on, our millennials or our Generation Z kids that, they grow up in a culture where they're not challenged. They get a trophy for everything.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, well, who gave them the trophy? Well, that was me. That was, my generation. Like, I'm a parent now. So, it's not their fault that that's how we were raised. The parents decided at some point, this is what we think is healthy for the kids. And I think what we're seeing now is, if we're not careful, we're raising generations of kids who don't understand what failure is.
Yeah.
And don't know how to handle it. And I don't know about you, but as a parent, I find myself all the time, even with my coaching background and my athletic background, I find myself all the time just trying to shield my kids from adversity. Right? I just want to make it easy. I don't want them to feel uneasy, or I don't want them to face opposition. And my wife and I talk about that all the time, that we got to fight that, because I'd rather them face that now while they're under my roof and I can help them recover, than when they're 22 or 23 and they've never experienced it and it could potentially ruin the first half of their life.
Yeah.
So I can't underscore to me the value of what it means to be a part of a team and be a part of athletics.
Yeah. Yeah, you're able to provide that safety net now with them being kids, because, I worked law enforcement before this, and I worked at the high school for 3 years. I coached football out there while I was out there too, and I saw the result of what we just talked about, everybody getting a trophy, and failure was crippling for some people. Like, I want to get you back on the field. I want to get you back in the classroom, but there was no way to cope with it. They didn't learn coping, and they didn't know how to bounce back up. They didn't have coaches to say, hey, try this, let's do this, maybe this will help. Like, they didn't have that. So they would just cripple. Yeah. And we've got a lot of work ahead of us.
Yeah. And there's a part of that that's like the fear of failure, right? That we're trying to make sure that people succeed all the time, and there's not, failure is the best. It's the best teacher sometimes.
It is.
And it's something that we look for in leaders. In our organization, we talk about what makes a great leader. There's lots of books on that, and there's lots of, hey, you need this, and this, and most of them are all right. I know for us, we've kind of decided, or at least in my leadership, I've decided I'm looking for 3 attributes. One of them is somebody's ability to risk failure. As a leader, are you willing to try something new and do something that you're not sure how it's going to work out? Because the only way we'll ever know is if you give it a shot. And that's as crazy as it sounds, it's a rare attribute these days in leaders. And I think what's funny about that is I think the evidence is so strong for leaders who are successful that we can look at that's been a part of their story all the time, right? They tried this and failed. Yep. They gave this a shot, it didn't work, and for some reason we're risk adverse, and we've got this fear of failure, and that's a bad trait for strong leaders to have.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah. I mean, think about Michael Jordan.
Great example.
All the failure. No one talks about the failure because it's not sexy. It doesn't appeal to, what they want to get on the news or when they want to put on sports programs. But the man failed a lot.
Yeah. And it's a kind of a famous part of his story, right? That Michael Jordan got cut from his high school basketball team, right?
Yeah.
And it's easy to see all the success that came after that, but to understand the reality of that in a moment where he had to decide, am I going to let this define me, or am I going to move forward with it? I've got to. I'm fascinated. This might be surprising. I'm not much of a reader. I never have been. My wife actually makes fun of me all the time because if she's reading books with our kids now through school, she's like, "Did you read this as a kid?" And I was like, "No." And like even now, people will ask, "Well, what leadership books are you reading?" And it's kind of like, "Yeah, I'm not much of a reader, but I'm actually a huge documentary guy. Love watching documentaries. Yeah. I'm fascinated by that. So maybe I'm just more of an audio and visual learner." Guilty. As far as that goes. But I don't know if there was a series on, I think it was History Channel, about the men who built America.
Okay,
and
yeah.
now they've got the food that built America.
I watched that whole thing.
They've got machines that built America and all this. So when you talk about failure, I think about Colonel Sanders, right? I think about Kentucky Fried Chicken. I mean, this guy failed his whole life, and even when he finally got it going, there was adversity there, and it wasn't until late in his life that he finally got it going. But he always had a dream. He always had a plan, and he always, was pushing forward. And what's interesting about his story, I think, that kind of is maybe a measure of some of this, don't be afraid to fail, is that he actually did more innovating on the pressure cooking side than he did on the chicken side.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, hey, KFC's got this secret recipe, and that's true. But what made it all work for him was his tinkering and his discovery related to pressure cooking that chicken. Yeah. And I was like, man, I just always thought it was him, trying to mix up the right spices and everything. But it was really his ability to figure out how to cook that the right way. And failure after failure and time after time, he kept at it. He kept coming back and kept coming back. And so we've got to be careful not to shield our kids or our generations that are coming from that, and help them realize that you can learn from the past and apply that. But in order to innovate and to be truly unique, you have to risk failure. Yeah. And we're asking kids to be unique and be themselves, but to not fail. Yeah. And those two things just won't work together.
No, they won't. So, as the podcast flows through and we talk and we have these conversations, I kind of work through these like bullet points that I like to follow to get the information out and whatnot. And we've covered some career movement. You definitely talked about some of your influences, which were some of the coaches, and then the man that got you down here for the Christian Fellowship Sports Ministry. We were talking about failure, and one of the pieces on here I like to cover is your particular failures that might have led to triumphs later in life. Yeah. Do you have any that you can remember, a specific failure that you can say, yeah, that happened and I learned a lot from it and it helped me get here?
Yeah, I probably most of my upbringing I would put into that category. Again, going back to a little bit of my background, it wasn't necessarily because anything I chose, but my upbringing was anything but textbook. I was always loved. I was always cared for. I had a grandmother that was always praying for me, and I believe that to be the reason why things worked out. God answered her prayers for my life, and my grandmother is my hero as far as that goes. But I had lots of failures growing up with, poor decision making, and I was a guy that was always in church because my family was a part of church, but I got really good at just playing church. I kind of had two lives. I had the life that was happening at church, and everybody would say, oh, that guy really, loves God, and man, what a great, kid he is. And then, over here, it was like, I wasn't, burning down houses or anything, but I was definitely pushing the envelope as much as I could. How much can I get away with and still be a Christian, or how much can I do and still, still be considered saved, right? And so one of the failures I think I have now is also kind of wrapped up in a regret, and that's that I have friends that I know from high school that probably look at what I'm doing now and look at how I maybe acted behind the scenes, with some of my good friends then, and there's a disconnect, and some of them are not church people, they're not believers, and it can hurt me sometimes to think about, man, I didn't produce the greatest influence or evidence of what God had done in my life to that group of people. Now they look at what I do and they probably just chalk me up as another hypocrite, right? Yeah. Now this guy grew up like this, and I saw him do this and I saw him do that, and now he's doing this, like whatever, So that's a failure of mine. My witness wasn't as strong as I wanted it to be at that time. And then I would say, kind of in my professional life, one of my failures early on was, as much as I tried to be about people and serving and helping people, I guess I feel like there was always a little bit of an agenda in my mind for how that was going to somehow get me to a further place. Yeah. And I wouldn't say I used people. It wasn't that at all. But I knew that if there was success, on the field, or there was success with this, particular athlete, that it was going to somehow give me, a leg up or credit for it. And so that probably wasn't as visible to people, but it was certainly something that I look back on now and thought, man, I could have had a little bit better motivation in that time for why I was doing it and for what I was doing. And then, so luckily, I don't know that I've had any huge life failures that have caused, these moments where my life has gone off track or anything like that. But, I've got little things in leadership along the way that I learned and try to continue to apply to things I do now and whatnot. But those are probably a couple of examples.
Yeah. Well, those clearly keep you driven.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about that. And you're an executive pastor at OVCN. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice to anybody that would want to pursue what you're doing?
To be a pastor?
Yeah.
Yeah. This would probably be the time to make a joke and be like, don't do it. You know what I mean?
Run.
But, yeah, exactly. Run as fast as you can. So, no, I would say this. My experience as a pastor is probably a little bit unique from a lot of others. I work as a part of a great church. My boss is one of my best friends. Craig Coulter is a visionary leader that cares for people. He's the most humble leader I think I've ever met. He would have every reason to kind of be arrogant and proud about all that he's accomplished and all that he's done, especially at our church now, and he's just not that way. And so that gives me the opportunity to work in an environment that is really healthy. And so I guess my advice would be, I felt like since the time I started coaching, everything that I felt like I've done professionally has been a calling. So one of the things I remember feeling when I first started coaching was that, hey, this is not a vocation, this is a calling. I get a chance every year to influence 30 or 35 young men about what it means to be a better son, husband, and father in that order. And we would talk to people about that. That was kind of one of our mantras while we were coaching, sons, husbands, and fathers in that order. Like, that is a calling, right? And that's why coaches are so influential.
Yeah.
And so I always felt like that was a ministry, and I got a chance to do it at 2 Christian universities, so that allowed us to be a little more open about how we were doing that. But when I got into FCA, same thing, right? This is a calling. This is a lifestyle that my family's living to try to help coaches and help athletes take one step closer to Jesus Christ. And we're going to use the platform of sports to have that conversation, right? How do I deal with this failure spiritually? How do I deal with this success spiritually? How do I get rid of all the distractions and focus on what I need to do on the field? How do I be a great teammate, right? All those things, and that's a calling. And when I was working for FCA, Pastor Craig had approached me and said, hey, our church is growing and we really need, somebody to come in and kind of help with our day-to-day operations to make sure we've got ministry alignment along all of the things that our church is doing and to help us, grow into the next phase of things and innovate a little bit. And where are we going and where do we want to be in 10 years? And Craig provides that vision, and he needed somebody to put legs to it and to make it happen. And so my master's degree was actually in organizational management. So my mind works in process, in strategy, in kind of how do you pare things down and get all the way down to action steps, what's measurable, right? I'm a big believer that, goals they have to focus on what you want and they have to be measurable. Otherwise, it's just kind of, this lofty thought. And so when I eventually accepted the position as executive pastor, it was this kind of, I guess, marriage between a way that I thought I was gifted in the way that my mind worked and the way that I had been trained and some of the experience that I had with this opportunity to be a part of this church that God is just blessing unbelievably and doing incredible things with. And so my advice would just be, no matter where you're at, everything as a Christian should be a calling. It's not a vocation. Now, I'm in vocational pastoral ministry, but it's the calling of my life, right?
Yeah.
Living the Dream Media is now the calling of your life. You have burned every ship that got you to this point, and you are moving forward with it because you feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So the question then becomes for every believer is, as we do that, how do you make sure you're doing that as a calling and not just as a job or a vocation? That's what Christ called us to do in every area of our life. And so that probably be my best advice is that if you'll do that in every area of your life, it might eventually lead to pastoral ministry.
Yeah.
But if you're a pastor now, it's not just about the sermon on Sunday. It's not just about, how you articulate the gospel in front of people. It's about how you live that out with the people that God's entrusted you to serve. And so lots of ways to serve the church. So if you're a young pastor and you're thinking, man, I really would like to be at a larger church, I'd like to have more responsibility, Be faithful with what you have now. Do it to the absolute best of your ability. And remember, it's not just a job. It's your calling. It's what God's called you to do for this time. That means you wake up every day with this drive and passion to make sure you give it everything you got.
Yeah. Such a great perspective on it.
Yeah.
Really is, because I can attest to it, because growing up, I had this idea of how I wanted things to play out for myself. Like, I'm going to focus on doing this and making this happen. Eventually I realized that A, wasn't going to happen. And you start going, well, what can I blame externally that's occurring for that not happening?
Yeah.
Right. And then more stuff started happening. It started pointing me to this other direction. And then you look at it now and you go, okay, there was something else involved with it.
Sure. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah,
and if
the spiritual side of it, and it's just...
Exactly, right? For Christians, everything in our life should be a stewardship issue, right? It's not just stewardship of money and finances, it's stewardship of time. It's also stewardship of talents and giftings and abilities.
Yeah.
If you're gifted and talented in areas and you're not utilizing that to somehow grow the kingdom, I would challenge people to figure out, where's a place I can do that? How can I put the things that God's made me most passionate about to work for the kingdom? And it might simply be, as a business guy, it means that I'm going to start running my company a little more boldly for the things of Christ. And that doesn't mean you have to put the Christian fish on your logo, right? Because everybody does that.
Yeah.
But it does mean that in every interaction, in every employee interaction and customer interaction and every business transaction, everything you do is kind of through this mindset of, how do I steward this gift that God has given me of running this business and being able to provide for the people that are a part of it and make sure that I'm honoring Him in all of those things, right? Yeah. God calls people to be plumbers, media specialists, radio people, professionals, day laborers, just as much as He calls people to be pastors. We have to have people that believe that they are placed right where God wants them to be, to have the influence that God wants them to have. Yeah. And as believers, that's a great place for us to start.
Yeah.
And I know not just believers are listening to this, but that mindset. So if you're not yet a believer, and that's not necessarily where you're at, I think the advice would be to make sure that passion that you feel like you have, that you're able to show that, and that's on display for the people that you're interacting with and whatever endeavor it is you're a part of. And that they would say of you, man, that person is passionate, they're full of integrity, they're honest, they're hardworking, and I appreciate that about them.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So eloquently put. Yeah. I love it. Hey, we got to take a quick break for our sponsors. So we're going to do that right now, and then we'll get back and we'll finish this podcast and hear some more from you.
Let's do it.
Cool. Yeah. If you have information on a serious crime or the location of a person who is wanted, contact 88 Crime via phone at 520-882-7463 or give a tip online or by mobile app. If your tip leads to a felony arrest and/or indictment, you will be eligible for a reward of up to $2,500. So you had talked about 3 things that were important to you for, bringing somebody on to be a leader in the church.
Yeah. You
covered the first one.
Yep.
What are the other 2?
Yeah. So these are things we look for, especially when we're hiring pastoral staff at our church. We want people that have capacity, meaning that a leader has the ability to do anything, even if it's not their gifting or they're not passionate about it. Do they have the ability to do it, right? Can I ask the youth pastor to run kids ministry for 6 months, even if it's not their calling and not their passion? And the answer on our staff is yes, they can, because they're great leaders and they can figure out how to get it done. Even if it's not their calling or they're not passionate about it, do they have capacity and can they get it done? Can they multitask? Can they handle lots of things at one time? So capacity is one of them. We talked a little bit about people who are willing to risk. You got to try new things. You have to be willing to try new things and be willing to fail at them. And then the third one is feel. And that comes from just my coaching background and my world of athletics. And you would talk a lot about, hey, does a player have feel for the game? Sometimes it's hard to measure, but you know it when you see it. Do they have feel? Do they understand the situation? How do they move between pitches? How do they move on and off the sideline? How do they move away from the ball? Do they have feel for what's going on? And in our context, that just might be, hey, can we as a leader, can we put a leader in a room of people who are 75 years old and they can connect and figure out how to speak to that room, and can that same person be in a room of 18-year-old high school students and do the same thing? Do they have feel for conversation and the social setting and understanding for what they're doing? So those are the three things that we are looking for in leaders and that we feel like all our leaders have.
Yeah. I love that you bring that all to the table, because I think there's a big misconception about leadership and the idea of the title, that just because you have the title of a leader that everything's going to work out for you. And it's not true, like, at all, you know. And you talking about those three things, I've been in several different, you know, career fields growing up. You know, I started in, you know, the restaurant business when I was young, and then I moved into the retail part of business when I got a little older, while I was in college. And then, you know, as I moved into law enforcement, you know, there's really important leadership roles in all of these. And what I can look back at now with you bringing that up is there was obviously there was leaders missing a lot of that stuff that I had experienced. And we all know that we've come across a leader that you go, I don't know if I like what they're doing, and I don't know if they're really a leader truly. And I think people hearing what you just said should really take that into consideration into their companies, their daily lives, their coaching, anything that you're involved with when you're in a leadership role, because don't get caught up in the idea that leadership is a title and it's all going to work out for you, because it's going to crumble and you're going to struggle. It's going to be hard. So really think about what Pastor Chris said regarding that. I'm going to keep listening to that over and over again in my head, because I want that to be the way we look at things here, right? Because you can learn a lot from what you're doing over there. And I was telling you, you know, every time I go in there every week, there's some sort of new innovation, right? It could be just a new graphic is being presented on a wall or on a screen, or there's this new program that's going on, and it's always happening. Yeah. And that's how your life should be. You should always be improving. That's how your business should be, and, you know, your relationship should be. I think people can learn a lot from this. I am, and I really want to thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast, and I want to share the opportunity for people to connect with you. And so I'm going to ask, how do people connect with you?
Yeah. So we would encourage everybody to be planted in a church. In fact, it's funny that you would ask that question. It's just as the first week of the sermon series that we started this week, and we preached on that, just the difference between going to a church and being planted in a church. And I think lots of us, especially over the last 18 months, if we were going to a church, maybe we stopped, or if we were planted in a church, maybe we just started going. Meaning that we weren't invested and we weren't, we weren't willing to be a part of the mission or vision. And so there's lots of great churches with great pastors in the Tucson area, and Tucson is one of the most unchurched cities in America. And with all that, there's so many great ministers here in town. And so lots of churches you can be a part of. Oro Valley Church of the Nazarene may not be the right fit for everyone, but if you don't have a church home or you're compelled to try, we would invite everybody to give OVC a try. We feel like we're doing a great thing and God's blessing us, and there's lots of places for people to get involved, but we want to encourage people to be planted in a church. And so you can find information specifically for OVCN at ovcn.church, or if anybody specifically has a question or a comment for me, they can email me at chris@ovcn.church. There's also a link at ovcn.church as well if for some reason people don't have anything to write that down with at this moment. But you can find that, call the church office. We're listed everywhere, and just say, I want to talk to Pastor Chris. I heard him on this podcast, and I'll call back. I don't actually have an administrative assistant. We do that on purpose. I like to be able to connect with people. So I don't have a gatekeeper. Find me directly, and I'd be happy to talk with anybody and answer any questions people might have.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thanks. So get a hold of them if you're interested. I want to talk about service last night. And you're talking about being planted into a church. And you talked about the sequoia trees, and how their roots are in the ground, and how their roots will mingle with and intertwine with the roots of other sequoia trees that are in the ground. and how they work together against the winds and the storm.
Yeah.
Right. Can you talk about that a little bit
Sure.
more? Because
Yeah.
you brought up that point about the last 18 months have been really hard for people. And you said that people have been isolated and alone. And when you're isolated and alone, it's really hard to get through things.
That's right.
It's scary.
Yeah.
I personally have been in that position. I think everybody in here in this room has probably experienced that at some point.
Yeah.
But the part about the trees, if you could cover that for the listeners.
Yeah. I actually, before I do that, I want to give you another analogy. I didn't work it in there, but it's one that's kind of local to us here in town, even though people elsewhere might hear it. But here locally, we have a place called the Biosphere 2, right?
Yeah.
U of A started Biosphere 2. It was originally designed as hey, if we can somehow figure out how to live on Mars, I think we can start just north of Tucson. It's kind of similar to Mars, and we'll see if we can create this glass igloo, and we'll see if we can create everything we need just to go do that on another planet or somewhere else.
Yeah.
And lots of things that happen and still happen at the Biosphere 2. It's this unbelievable research center, lots of great findings and things coming out of there on plant research and all that kind of stuff. But that place originally, if you remember, was built, they locked scientists in there for a year to see if they could make it go and make it function. And what the mission eventually evolved over time, and it wasn't really well documented why, but the real reason why is they realized that in the Biosphere 2, they couldn't produce enough oxygen. The trees could not produce enough oxygen in there, or the plants could not produce enough oxygen on their own. They had to have large trees that could produce the oxygen needed to make things go. What they realized, though, because the Biosphere 2 was such a pristine environment, that the trees wouldn't actually grow deep roots. They wouldn't grow tap roots. They wouldn't grow roots that were necessary to face the adversity that would be normal out in nature. Because there was no wind and there was no rain and there were no elements in there. There was no adversity. The large trees that were supposed to produce the oxygen never were able to grow the roots needed to sustain the life that was necessary for them to live in the Biosphere 2. And because of that reason, that original goal for the Biosphere 2 was kind of deemed a failure. They couldn't figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting analogy further when you talk about the sequoia, the redwood trees in California, in that the largest organisms on planet Earth, those things are 2,000 years old. They're 30 stories high. Some of those trees can be 40 feet across at their base. If you've been there, you can drive a car through one of them that has a split, trunk on it. They kind of defy logic. And you would think, well, a tree like that just has to have a taproot that just goes forever, because we know that's how trees grow. Trees have a taproot that is typically as deep as the tree is tall. So a tree that's 30 or 40 or 50 feet tall has a taproot that's 50 feet deep. And the redwoods don't work like that. Their roots actually grow more horizontally, and they connect with trees' roots that are next to them and create this grid underneath the surface that nobody can see. And basically, they share the burden of the adversity. When the wind blows one tree, all of them share the workload of keeping that tree upright and stable deep below the surface through this network of interlocking roots. And you cannot plant a redwood by itself. You will never see one redwood tree standing alone. They are called a stand of redwoods. They have to grow in multiples. They cannot grow by themselves. You can't plant a redwood in the middle of your yard and expect it to grow to be 30 stories tall, because it's not designed for that. It's designed to grow with the help of the other redwoods around it. And so it's just such a great kind of natural analogy for us as human beings, whether you're a person of faith or not. We have to have a network of people that support us.
Yeah.
Being isolated, being alone can be a real, it causes depression. It causes, these feelings of inadequacy and anxiousness and fear of the future. And we're just made and designed to be together. And this last 18 months has convinced some people that it's not safe for them to be together. And for some with their health, I'm not going to argue that it's not. But I also think that for a lot of people, they're sacrificing what they believe is their physical health because of COVID. And they're sacrificing their mental and emotional health because they've disconnected from people. And just like the redwoods, we have got to have a network of people that help us shoulder this load, because life is not easy. Mm-hmm. It should be joyous. It's full of ups and downs. Ultimately, as a believer, I believe that God's got our best interest in mind and our best interest at heart, but we need people. And the redwoods are just a great analogy for that, man, if it takes the largest living organism on earth to depend on something else to stay upright, then we need that same thing, not just from our Heavenly Father, but from our brothers and sisters and people that we call friends and our network around us. We need each other to stand.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah,
no doubt. Thank you for covering that.
Yeah.
That is just, it's powerful.
Yeah. What's funny is I've used that analogy before. I've actually never been to the redwoods. So I'm hopeful to be able to tell that a little bit better in the future when I've actually been there and seen it. So I'm working hard to try to get there, hopefully in the near future.
Here you go.
So
right on. You got to take pictures.
I know, right? Yeah.
You're going to have to
now.
The
little picture with me, just kind of the tiny little person. So we went up to Washington State, to Olympic National Park back in July with my family, did an RV trip up there, and they've got some huge trees up there too. And we took some pictures next to I think some cypress trees up there and maybe a large aspen, and there's the world's largest, and I can't remember what type of evergreen tree it is right now. But anyway, it was this giant tree, and it's like, man, that thing was massive. So I've seen those, but I know the redwoods make those look, like mesquites. So I gotta get up there and check those out.
Hey, so what's a common myth, if any, regarding being a pastor that you would like to debunk?
Yeah. Probably that we live our life just like everybody else. As crazy as that might seem, I think there's sometimes an assumption that every aspect of our life is as what you see on a Sunday morning or during a service. Mm-hmm. And there's just reality of life that is present, right? I have disagreements with my wife. We get frustrated with our kids. The house can be a mess. I get mad at the dog. That all of those things, right? We snap at each other when we're late to get out the door, get to an event. All of those things are in play. Mm-hmm. We have the same challenges everybody else does, and that maybe as a pastor we might have ultimately better perspective on some of that stuff, hopefully, or at least we should, if we're trying to lead and help people, gain a better understanding of faith. But at the end of the day, we're just real, just like everybody else, and I deal with the same challenges and same issues. I have, temptations and shortcomings just like everybody else that I have to work on daily to try to overcome. And I often tell people the only difference, at least if you're a Christian, the only difference between you and me is that I said yes to being a pastor and you didn't. Other than that, we're pretty much the same. I'm just doing a different type of work. Mm-hmm. And just that maybe there's a misconception sometimes that pastors have it all together all the time, and there's never anything, their home is just full of, Gregorian chant and beautiful worship music and, all this peace and harmony. And I just promise you, that's not my house. So we're just real,
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of stuff happens too with, I was talking to the wife the other day because she's like, I go on social media and Instagram and stuff, and I see like these moms that are on there because we just had a baby 3 months ago, and she's like, I see moms and stuff on there, and they look like they're just killing it. Like everything's all good. Like I got this, my schedule's together, my diet's together, the baby's good. Like nothing, like we're untouchable.
That's right.
Whole untouchable idea.
Yeah.
And
Instagram moms got it together for sure.
Yeah. And she's like, you know what? I know that's all BS.
That's right.
I know that it's not true. That's not real. I'm like, people do that a lot sometimes because there is a lot of other stuff going on at home, and that's like their sense of like, hey, I can put on this this image on there. And what I'm getting at is the myth, right? That all of us, there's reality, and then there's what people might think and might see. And
I think it's a misconception about even church and outreach in the gospel as well, right? Mm-hmm. The misconception that, man, I'm too messed up to go to church. I got to get some stuff together before I start to pursue a life of faith. And that actually is completely backwards. It's actually in that moment where God expects you to call out to him most, and where you have the opportunity to get connected, and then with God's help, begin to clean up things in your life maybe that aren't going well, right? But we've got this social media approval anxiety deal that leads to that, right? Everybody leads the perfect life on social media. In fact, some of the most entertaining social media follows I have are people who kind of do opposite of that. It's kind of like, hey, let me just show you how messed up my life is, right? Let me just keep it real, or let me make fun of people who think it's all perfect, right? Those things are really entertaining because I think at the end of the day, those are real, And that performance to do things a certain way via social media or to portray this is just, man, it's totally counter to what it means to live a life of faith and to follow God. God loves us in spite of all of our shortcomings and all of the things that maybe we don't have together. And that's the beauty of the gospel. We don't have to perform to be a child of God.
Yeah. So we're coming towards the end here, and this next section, it's comedic. It's supposed to be funny.
All right.
But we're talking about the whole misconception and myth stuff. But so I recently went and got a gentleman's facial done.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Your face is you're glowing, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. I put on some of the moisturizer they gave me this morning. And I wasn't into that type of self-care or anything like that for a long time. I was just I'm a dude. That's like, I'm supposed to, another misconception, I'm supposed to just be like, all the time.
I need calluses and facial hair. Yeah.
So I want to clarify to people that my day is not where I just go and get gentlemen's facials and I'm getting
it's a good thing. Yeah.
Just going and just living this life where I'm not really working or anything. That's really good clarity.
I
just want to clarify that right now.
Good.
Because I have gotten some messages and some responses in my in my DMs about it. And
but you're not afraid to try new things. So there you go.
No, I'm not. And you know what? It was probably one of the most enlightening experiences I've ever had, because I walked out of there going, there is a whole nother way to live. Take care of yourself. I mean, I go to the gym and try to do that, but there's another way to just take care of your skin and how you feel, and the way there's a massage aspect to it too, and it's like, oh my God, I could feel the tension in my jaw, like when
really
she hit this like spot, and she's gonna be the next guest on the show.
All right, I'll go. Are you trying to get me to go? It sounds. I'll go.
You should go. And
okay.
But I just wanted to cover.
You convinced me. Yeah,
I'm not trying to sell, but
my face, I think, is on TV or screen more than yours, so I think I need to do this now. Yeah. Sounds like okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you'll be golden. Yeah, you'll love it. You'll love it. So I just wanted to clarify, because a lot of people knew me. They're probably like,
yeah, that's good.
This guy is getting gentlemen's facials.
All right.
What are you doing?
Yeah. So let me tell you. I guess I don't know if it's a joke or confession, one of the two. But because I am up front every week, and because thousands of people every week see our stuff or whatever, I'm very particular about my hair. And not why I have a hat on today necessarily, but I have.
You did it to make me feel good, because I'm bald.
Yes, I know. Well, I didn't want to. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say it. So this lady Jen, I've been going to her for probably 4 years now. And the thing I love about it is I sit down in the chair and I don't have to tell her, hey, will you do this? Will you do this? Like, she's been cutting my hair long enough. She knows what needs to be done. I just sit down. She does it. I've got total confidence in her. Yeah. Always looks great. Well, Jen has actually been taking a little bit of a break because for some personal reasons, and she hasn't cut hair in 2 months.
Uh-oh.
And I've been to like 3 different people, and every time I go in, I'm like panicked, and I'm like, and I'm like, this haircut's not coming out the way I want it to. So it's not quite like a facial, but I'm pretty particular about who cuts my hair and how it gets cut. And I need Jen to get back to work pretty quick, because I'm struggling here, and I gotta get that fixed. So
yeah. Oh, everybody's got their hair person and stuff like
right.
that. Yeah, oh yeah, no, for sure. I get it.
Yeah.
So now that we've got our confessions out there,
that's
for
good.
People to put in my facial stuff. There's this thing we do is called dad jokes here.
Yeah, you asked me about that. I'm not a good joke guy, so I think we're gonna have to go to the book potentially, because I don't know that I have one. The only one I have is so dumb. I don't even know if it's a dad joke, because do you remember the Laffy Taffy candy?
Yeah,
I used to have the jokes in it, right? So I only really remember one joke from that, and that was, why did the apple turn over?
Why?
Because it saw the cinnamon roll. I mean, that's kind of
That's
a dad
good one.
joke,
That's
right?
a good one. Yeah, oh yeah, it's a horrible dad joke.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
That means it's good, so it belongs here.
That's the only one I have, really, and it's the one I go
Yeah.
to, and so I'm just, I'm not a good dad joke guy, so I need you to help me out here.
Well, hopefully the book will help you a little bit.
Okay.
But, you bring up the Laffy Taffy. I actually have one from a Laffy Taffy that I remembered from when I was young, and it is, what do you call a cow with no legs?
Oh man, I don't know.
Ground meat.
There you go. That works. That is a good dad joke. That's good. Yeah.
It was on the back.
Okay.
It was on the back of one of those. And
Yeah.
I was like, that is good.
So would that be like, what do you call a dog with no legs?
What?
It doesn't matter. It won't come anyway. Is that a dad joke?
It's good.
Okay, there you go. So maybe I got a few more than I think.
You're good.
Yeah.
Give us one more. You might not even have to use the book.
Oh man, I don't know. We might have to go back to the book. I'm trying to think of. There's one. So what do you call a woman with one leg?
What?
Eileen. Is that a dad? I guess if those are dad jokes, then they work. So
Yeah.
All right, there you go.
They're good when Nereda in the background, who's doing the sound for us, does a great job. If she's laughing or rolling her eyes.
Okay, perfect.
So if she
the
rolls
eye
her
roll.
eyes-
I think the eye roll is a better indication that it's a solid dad joke, right? Than an
Yeah.
actual laugh.
Yeah.
Okay, well then good. Okay, well then there you go. I guess I didn't need the book.
No, you're good.
I
I'll
didn't know
read
if
one
those
from the
counted.
book just
Yeah.
so we say we used it today.
Okay, let's do it.
And it's from the Exceptionally Bad Dad Jokes, So Frightfully Awful Yet Wonderfully Spiffing, Volume 1.
Okay.
And, they don't even number the pages in here. That's how bad this book is. Yeah. Wow. Okay. I just realized that, and I've been using it for a while. There was a river that ran through Egypt no one believed existed. Locally, it was known as Denial.
That's right. I've actually heard that one too. All right, there you go.
Oh,
That's
okay.
good. So every week we have a staff meeting on Tuesdays with all of our pastoral staff, and we do a lot of laughing in there and a lot of jokes, a lot of sarcasm. Our team gets along great as far as that goes. And Pastor Connor, our associate music pastor, is probably our youngest staff member, and he is kind of always making these offhanded comments, and everybody is telling him that, hey, that's a bad dad joke because he's got a 3-year-old daughter and he's kind of the newest dad. So that we do some dad jokes, but that one's pretty good. I'll have to use Denial.
Denial.
That's right.
Denial. So. Well, Chris, it was a pleasure having you here. It was just an amazing experience. I hope the listeners have the same feel that I do. And you know what? It's important for you to really think about what he said as far as the leadership and, like we talked about with the service and regarding the sequoia trees, and there's the message that's behind it. And, if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out to your community or the churches. And we're going to be heading out of the podcast. And Nereda, thank you again for the job you do. And Chris, thank you again one more time for being here. Is there anything you want to?
No, just my honor and privilege. I love what you guys are doing here. I love what God's doing in your life and what LTD is up to. I think there's going to be big things. And I think just that encouragement that wherever you're at, if you're not planted in a church, find a Bible-believing church and get planted there. It'll change your life. And I think
Agreed.
that's something we want. That's a message we want everybody to know.
Yeah. And listeners, again, if you're interested in being on the Now You Know podcast with me, I will be starting a new season here pretty soon. Just reach out to us. You can email us at contact@ltdmedia.net, or you can find us online on our website at ltdmedia.net. And we are on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Thank you for listening.